When you're planning a trip, do you ever think that you're just not doing it right? You could be doing it better. Everything just feels so hard. And I totally get that because if you are planning just one trip a year, one big trip a year to somewhere new, then this is just like relearning things every single time that you are trying to plan a trip. But um, I plan trips for a living. So I'm doing this all the time. And I'm going to share five of the mistakes that you are probably making when you are planning a trip. And you know what? I am guilty of some of these too. So I will not say that I'm perfect either. It's more of a do as I say, not necessarily as I do. So we're going to get into that. But I would love to know if you are joining live or watching the replay. Pop in the comments where you're tuning in from so I know that you are with me. And if you are new to me and this weekly show that I do, my name is Susie Chow. I run my own travel business, Carpe Diem Traveler. I've been doing that since 2016. And I've also planned a whole lot of trips, not only for me, but also for myself. I've personally been to 50 countries and all 7 continents. So chances are very high that if you have a place in mind, that big bucket list trip, I've probably already been there, or at a minimum, planned a trip for somebody else to go there. So you can say I know what I'm doing when it comes to travel planning. And before I get into the 5 mistakes, I want to just do a quick plug for a travel planning party that I'm throwing next Friday. I'm very excited about this. We're going to go way deeper into tips and tricks and how to plan better, faster, and more higher quality trips that are designed just for you, because I really focus on customized trips, not the mass market, just hop on a cruise or a tour type of thing, which there's nothing wrong with that. But my specialty is really in tailoring trips to fit individual needs and preferences. So, in that travel planning party that is next Friday, you are invited officially. And I'm going to pop the link at the end of this into, if you're watching me on LinkedIn or Instagram, I'll pop in the link to join in the comments because I would love to have you. And what we're going to cover is my 5-step process for how I plan trips with all of my clients that really streamlines that whole process, versus going down rabbit holes galore on Google, which is, probably something that you're doing. And that's okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as well today on this live here. And so, yeah, we'll talk about in the planning process, my 5-step process. The planning party, we'll talk about my 5-step process. And we're also going to actually sit down and literally plan out your trips for 2024. It is not too early, especially if you're planning trips in the summer. If you've got your eyes on Europe, it's already crazy just based on the trips that I've planned and currently planning for clients for that time frame. Availability is already really low when you consider the Olympics, Taylor Swift, and all of the things going on in Europe, especially. But summer is always just a busy time to travel because that's when most people have the longest time off, just breaks from school, especially if you have a family. So if that is something that you have in mind, but you don't have a clue when, where, how you're going to make that happen, then join me for the party. So like I said, I'm going to be popping in the link to sign up for that. That it is going to be a Zoom call, so much more like private, even more. I mean, I would love for this to be interactive. So as I go through these mistakes, feel free to ask questions, and I can address those live here. But the planning party is going to be even like next level, way more interactive. So I am very excited for that. I hope you join me. So let's get into the 5 mistakes that you are making. And honestly, I am, like I said, making a lot of these too. So don't worry, you're not alone. We're also going to talk, after I cover the mistakes, I'll talk about how we can fix that, how it can be better. So stick around for those tips. All right. So the 5 mistakes that you're making when travel planning. The first one is you're not planning time off far enough in advance. Now, totally get this. You're busy. You might have some like rough ideas on, oh, I want to take a summer trip. Maybe I'll take a spring break trip or whatever it is. But there's just never seems to be enough time to plan that trip, right? And it's hard to plan travel. Chances are you start going down that path, you start maybe looking at flights or maybe accommodations, you hit a roadblock, either something's like way more expensive or maybe there's like complicated logistics and you're like over it. Okay, close the laptop, I'll get to that some other time, right? But that's not the case. You usually wait way too long to pick that back up, and then prices are even higher. So it's just this like bad cycle, vicious cycle that you are stuck in. And the consequences of that are that, I mean, hopefully this is not the case for you, but I think for a lot of people, the consequences, well, I'm just not going to go. Like it just doesn't make any sense anymore. And then you leave PTO days on the table, left unused, which I mean, that truly breaks my heart. So I hope that that's not you, but I totally get if that has happened to you before. But you're also not maximizing your time off because you're kind of left with like bottom of the barrel stuff. If you don't plan trips far enough in advance, then you're left with the leftovers, that all the other people who did plan in advance, they already snagged the good hotels and, the best flights. And, when you procrastinate, you're just kind of left with, the stuff that's really not great, and that just doesn't make for a good overall experience if you're paying more for something that you don't even necessarily want. So I don't want that to happen to you. So that's why I'm already talking about planning for 2024 trips, because here's the thing: most people don't even start thinking about trips for the year until January. So in the industry, the travel planning industry, we have a term for this. It's called wave season. That means a big old wave of bookings and inquiries hit like January 1st, because it's the new year. I'm going to be super organized and I'm going to plan my trips in advance. And they've got that New Year's energy. And so then, seriously, and I've seen this year after year after year. So it's something that isn't necessarily obvious to you, although now thinking about it does make sense, right? Everybody in January starts thinking in the future. It's also, I mean, for most of us, at least in North America, it's kind of like dreary out. So the travel planning is, a bit more exciting and easier to prioritize compared to like when it's beautiful outside and you just want to be outside. And so I think that, it's a bunch of different factors, but that's why I'm already talking now in October about travel planning for next year. And so getting ahead of that big wave of inquiries and people booking things and snatching up all the good stuff, right? So that's mistake number 1 is just not planning far enough in advance. Mistake number 2 is you're choosing your trip destination without much strategy. Maybe you're just randomly choosing it from your bucket list. or maybe you talk to a friend and they said, "Oh my gosh, this place is amazing. You must go now before it's ruined." Or maybe you're just kind of throwing a dart against a map and seeing where it hits. Or maybe you're just following the deals and looking at deal websites and seeing, what's a good price, and deciding to go someplace for that reason. Now, I mean, none of these are inherently bad. And I totally get why you're doing this, because you've probably always done it this way. Because you're also probably planning your own trips. And so this is all on your shoulders. So you don't know any other way. You just kind of continue doing what you've been doing. Or unless somebody else plans, like a group trip, let's say, then it's easy to just sign up and say, all right, let's go. But the consequences of this is, again, it doesn't seem bad on the surface, but the consequence is that you may end up either in a rut where you just kind of go to the same places every year because it's comfortable, because it's easy. And if you love that, great. But I know, at least of the clients and people that I talk to, there's a place for that type of trip where you go every year, but then there's also the place for like one big trip somewhere new. And the somewhere new, that's the thing that takes more energy and time to research and figure out how that will all work, because you haven't gone there before. You don't know how things work, right? And if you just like follow advice from your friend, then you might end up in a place that is just not a good fit for you. Even if it's like a good friend who, has your best interest in mind, what works for them might not work for you. So that's why, I think it's so important for what I do is really getting to know somebody, getting to know their interests and what are their priorities and what do they want to get out of this trip, because that's what's going to make choosing a destination so much more important and personalized, to make sure that it fits like that overall vision and goals of what you want to accomplish. And if you're just chasing the deals, if that's you, then honestly, sometimes it's just not even worth it. It's not worth the savings, because you're in, a bad room, ending up in a place that you didn't necessarily really want to be. Like, it sounded nice, especially if you're booking in January, any place with a beach, right? It sounds like wonderful. Why don't we do that? Yes. But it may have been worth spending a little bit more money to go to some place that really excites you and is going to be worth it. So something to consider there if you're a deal chaser. And again, nothing wrong with that, especially if you're like the type of person that just kind of would love to go everywhere. And I can kind of fall into that bucket as well. But not having a strategy with where you want to go and when you go and you do these trips, and you just kind of have this loose bucket list that you're maybe cherry picking from, is not having a strategy means that you might miss certain windows of time that are ideal, especially thinking about if you have kids. Certain places are better to go at certain ages. And I think that in general, most places, I mean, every place has kids, right? So I don't prescribe to like, this is the best place. But I think what I'm talking to more are the people who are thinking, well, I want to save this place for when my kid or children are older and they can remember it. The problem with that approach is that then you've got a very tight window to work with, like maybe like 6 to 10 years old. You can't take all the trips on your bucket list in that like 4-year period. Because the thing is that as they get older, and this kind of surprises a lot of people, a lot of my clients who have kids in high school, like they've got their own lives at that point. They've got, practices, especially if they're on a sports team or involved in any kind of activity. They've got a more strict school schedule where it's harder to like pull kids out of school. Ways around that, it all kind of depends on the family and the preference. But I think the important thing to call out here is that you you don't want to necessarily wait for too long because then it'll be too late. Same thing with you getting older. Like you're not getting any younger. So there's probably trips on that bucket list that are better to do when you're younger versus, like a cruise, which you can do at any point in time, right? So I think that you have to evaluate and start to prioritize that bucket list. And that's actually a whole other service that I used to do for clients. I loved it. Maybe I'll do that again in the future because it was really one of my favorite things to do. DM me if you have more questions about that or are interested because truly I love the strategy. I mean, I was a former management consultant, so like the strategy piece of it was fascinating to like pull that in and really be able to apply those same kind of practices to travel planning. So it's really the same kind of thing. You're doing a roadmap for my fellow consultants out there. You're doing a roadmap of your trips. So it's worth kind of considering that as an idea for how to take your messy bucket list and then put it into a prioritized list. With some flexibility, of course. Okay. So that was mistake number 2 is just kind of pulling your destinations really without any strategy. Now, the third, and at any point, comment below if these resonate with you. Like I said, we're probably all guilty of all of these mistakes at some point in time, even if it's not something that you regularly do. So no shame. I would love to help you with these. Okay, so mistake number 3 is you don't have a trip budget or even an idea of how much a trip is going to cost. Now, this is something that is, I get, it's hard. You don't know. I mean, for most of you, you probably don't know how much a trip is going to cost until you've like fully researched everything. Because you haven't really considered like estimating or knowing just roughly how much one place costs, versus another. And that's where, working with a travel professional, like we know that because we plan so many trips. And so we know generally what costs are like, for a destination, but also if you're like debating between a couple different destinations. And we'll get into that in like way more detail in the travel planning party that I'm doing next Friday. So again, get the link below in the comments to register for that. And for some of you, you've just never really considered it. It's kind of like travel is your, guilt-free spending, and you don't necessarily want to like budget it too much, but you just kind of make sure that you aren't going out of control with the things that you choose. Like you kind of choose something that feels comfortable, like within that range. But yeah, then you end up with like crazy high credit card bills after the fact. And you're like, ooh, when it's all added up, like it can be higher than you were expecting. So the consequences of making this mistake is you're either paying more than you were expecting, or maybe if you are on more of a budget and you are carefully taking a look at that and managing your finances, maybe you spend all this time doing all this research and then you find out that it's too expensive. So you have to like go back to the drawing board and find a new place. That's so much wasted time. And I don't want that for you. And you also might miss out on lower cost destinations because you just don't know that, because if let's say you're in that situation where you have to go back to the drawing board, but you don't know what are better alternatives that could still like help you meet your overall vision for the trip, or the specific activities that you want to do. There's tons of options all throughout the world, and you just might not be looking in the right place. For example, maybe if you're just looking at flights and you're looking at flights, to Europe versus like Southeast Asia, of course, the Southeast Asia flights are going to be more expensive. But once you're there, the costs are so much lower that it more than evens out, like when you're looking at the entire trip budget as a whole. So that's something that also that I specialize and love helping people with, because travel costs just aren't really known. And there are some websites that you can reference, like Budget Your Trip is great for regular vacations. If you're looking at longer trips, which is something that I specialize in for trips that are a month or longer, nomadlist.com are fantastic for just giving you some high level estimates. I also have and I'm going to be sharing this in the travel planning party next Friday. I've got a calculator that's got like pretty much all the countries, any country that you would probably want to go to, even states. And you can just pop in like how many people are traveling, how many days, and it spits out the numbers, and it's super easy. So that's great to like compare like so quickly, one country versus another country that you might be debating between without having to do like all the research and all of that. So huge time savings there. And I know you're busy more than anything, so that is huge. Okay, so mistake number 4 is that you try to pack in as much as possible to your very limited vacation days. This absolutely applies to my friends in the US, especially. I get why you're doing this. And I've been guilty of this as well. I've definitely like slowed down my travel planning pace over the years, but it's like this whole mentality, like work mentality of like, you gotta go. I posted a comedian, a reel yesterday on my stories that was just talking about like the difference in the European kind of work culture and American work culture. And, that's also the same in how we approach vacations. He had another video that was like, oh, how are we gonna fit it all in this New York? This is a European coming to New York. How are we gonna fit it in this short 8-week vacation? Whereas like for Americans, it's like 8 days maybe. And we're gonna go to 4 countries in Europe. Like that's just like how we roll, because we, work hard, play hard, and we want to like be productive and feel like we made the most out of that experience and that time, because it is so precious. But on the other hand, then you come back and then you're saying, I need a vacation for my vacation, and you're so exhausted and maybe you get sick, and like, was it even worth it? Because then you have, all this other stuff that you're coming back to reality. It was like this little blip of enjoyment, and then it's gone. So I challenge you to kind of think a little bit differently about what you need, especially in terms of like using travel as a way to like rest and rejuvenate yourself, so that you can come back even better. It's like more of a slow down to speed up type of mentality versus like a go, 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 see all the things, check everything off the list. And I think for a lot of people, it's like you have to go through that phase to realize then like that's exhausting. So if you're in that like more like it's time to kind of slow it down a bit, then I, definitely keep following me, because I'm with you on that. And then, the consequences of that, I already kind of explained that, but I really just want to instill the idea that you don't have to go hard and like see 5 countries in a week. You're just barely scratching the surface of each of those places, and then you'll want to go back, but then it's so hard. So it's like quantity, for me, quality is much more important than quantity when it comes to travel. Okay, so then the 5th mistake is that you keep pushing your big dream trips, just kicking that can down the road until later. And you might be doing this because you just think, oh, well, later I'll have more time, later I'll have more money. And, or again, save it for when the kids get older and they can remember it. Um, and, life's just too busy right now. I can't take that much time away. Consequences of this is that you don't take the trip, because life is always going to be busy. It's always going to feel busy, even if like your busy level is lower. Like you just kind of adapt to what you have. And I've seen way too many times clients come to me saying, "Oh, I've been, dreaming of Italy, going there for years, and it's finally time to go." Like probably decades for some people, and it's like you don't have to wait that long. And yeah, I think it really comes down to giving yourself permission to going and doing the things that you most want to do in life. And that's really hard. I 100% get that. But the thing is that there's never going to be this like magical, perfect time to do these things, right? So you just have to find the best time. And that is what is going to make all the difference. Because the thing is that, you know, travel's not getting any cheaper. You're not getting any younger. Your kids are growing up way too fast. And retirement, depending on where you're at, like could be decades away. So you don't want to kick the can down the road that far. Like it's time to enjoy some of life now. So I just invite you to daydream with me for, just a minute. Think about, that dream trip. Cause I'm sure when I said dream trip, some place popped in your mind. I would love to hear in the comments below, even if you're watching the replay, what is that dream destination that you are, that popped into your mind as soon as I said that. And you're like, oh, that's the trip I've been, pushing back and pushing back. I would love to know what that is. I mean, for me, the longest time it was Antarctica. But I did that, on my husband and I, we took a year-long, sabbatical to all 7 continents, and I checked that one off the list. And it was as incredible as I can imagine. And I'm so glad that I went, and, especially with a place like Antarctica, just along the lines of you're not getting any younger, the ice is not getting any bigger. So you want to, move some of those things, up your list in terms of priorities. Now I understand some of the big budget, or sorry, some of the big bucket list trips may require a larger budget than you're normally spending in a year. But that's where, if you have a plan, you can save towards that. And maybe it's something that you do next year or 3 years from now, even. But if you at least have, a rough idea, then you can plan accordingly, right? But I think it's, just what I'm talking about is just pushing it to some TBD date sometime in the future. But I would love for you to even say in 2028, I'm going to do it. And that's something that you can then plan for. So let's take a few minutes and talk about how can we fix these? How can we address these? And I've kind of alluded to some of them. I think it really comes down to 2 P's, prioritizing and planning in advance. So from a prioritization standpoint, you can't really have it all, right? So it comes down to prioritizing 3, or like really ranking your priorities of these 3 things. So the 3 things are timing, cost or money. I mean, what doesn't come down to time or money, right? And then also like the destination itself. So you can't have all 3 of those things be super important, right? Something's got to give. So for example, if cutting costs and, kind of keeping costs down is your number 1 priority, thinking about 2024, and then you have to be flexible on timing and or destination. So maybe your number 2 is destination, and you go and choose to go to that destination, like let's say Europe in the winter. That's when prices are going to be the cheapest. Also, crowds are going to be the lowest. So there's some real big benefits there. You're not going to have like the beachy weather. So again, you gotta just choose what's most important to you. And this can totally vary by trip. But another example, if timing is most important to you, so let's say you've got kids, you have to travel in the summer, then you just got to roll with, okay, prices are going to be higher, or you can choose a different destination, you know, that might be in low season during that point in time. So you can kind of save some money. So again, it's just like levers you push and pull. And we'll be going through this in more detail in the planning party too. And I'm going to like give very detailed examples. I'm pretty pumped about this actually, to show you exactly when you push and pull those levers, what it looks like from a cost standpoint and all of that. So it's going to be really good. That's some juicy stuff there. The other thing is prioritizing. When I was talking about prioritizing your bucket list, thinking big picture is thinking about like how badly do you want to go to this place, and what destinations would be better to go to sooner rather than later, whether that's based on your age, the age of your kids, specific activities that you want to do, things like that. I think that that's a really good exercise to just take a few minutes to just like brainstorm. And you reach out to me if you have specific questions as you go through that. Happy to help, because that's one of my favorite things to do ever. And then, like I mentioned, the second P is planning, is specifically in advance. So we talked about that, with mistake number one, and not like the consequences of not planning in advance. So you don't want to end up having a bad experience and paying more money than you need to, because you procrastinated. So I don't want that for you, which is exactly why I'm throwing a 2024 travel planning party next Friday. So I hope you will join me. We're going to cover, just as a reminder, my 5-step planning process for like specifically what I use with clients. And spoiler, choosing the destination is actually last, not first. You probably choose the destination first. I'll show you why you should choose your destination last. And like I said, we're going to go through like really detailed examples of like costs and duration, and have you think about your trip. I'll even give you a little calendar so you can start planning, exactly like when you're going to go places. We can talk about where. Very, very interactive. So I'm super pumped about that. And how we can maximize PTO days. So if you caught my stories, I was pulling people to see like what's the average PTO days, because I'll use that as an example of like how you can slice and dice those, to help you figure out how can you maximize not only your PTO costs, but also your annual travel budget. And we'll just kind of pick one of those, so you can have a realistic example for what's possible. So join me. I'm going to pop in the link, let me do that right now, the link to join, but I hope you will join me. And I'm also going to be talking a little bit about the planning boot camp that I'm running. So this is, if you caught my live last week or some of my posts, I am doing a very special planning boot camp that is running only through October 26th. So you need to join me then, or by then, to get, honestly, it's the most affordable way to work with me one-on-one. So I will hope you join me for that. But thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you will join me for the planning party next Friday. It's going to be good. I'll give you so much value in that you will be ready to rock for your 2024 travel schedule. And I just really look forward to sharing that with you. So I will see you then. Bye.